So, what is a true line of credit? Now, a true line of credit is the original product, and this is the only way to build wealth, because if you don't do it this way, you're going to have massive problems doing what I'm about to teach you. Is the evergreen line of credit has become almost extinct under the new Consumer Credit Code. The banks do not like people capitalising interest on the loan indefinitely. They want you to pay off the loan eventually. So the new Consumer Credit Code is structured around the notion that eventually you have to prove to people that you can actually pay off the loan. But if I'm getting an interest-only loan indefinitely, why would I have to pay it off? It doesn't make sense. So once again, these academics got together. It's like with negative gearing. You know, it's just... Do you guys know what happened with negative gearing in the 90s? Does anyone remember? Well, just recently it came up in the papers again. We get this new generation of politicians, you know, and they come in and say, oh, you know, investors are greedy and negative gearing is inflating the property prices in Australia. So let's strip back negative gearing, thinking that all these investors would dump properties. The last time negative gearing got clawed back, they actually changed legislation. They thought that all investors would sell their properties. But when negative gearing got clawed back, meaning you cannot depreciate your property, which I haven't covered negative gearing yet, you can't claim deductions. Overnight, guess what happened? All the investors increased their rental equal to what they lost through negative gearing. So rents went up from 300 to 450 overnight. So if negative gearing got clawed back tomorrow, what I would do is increase the rental on all my properties equal to the amount that I'm worse off by negative gearing. So it doesn't actually work, you know. And what happens is the politicians, it was very embarrassing for the Australian, by the way, guess who introduced it? Labor or Liberals? Well, of course. You know, so, you know, when they introduced the legislation to take back negative gearing, everyone's going, yeah. And then what happened was all the investors go, well, stuff that, I'm just increasing rentals. And they increased the rentals, and eventually the government had to pull back the legislation, and actually it was very embarrassing. You imagine pulling back legislation and virtually reversing it. And this is the reality. Every 3 to 5 years, someone comes through the ranks and starts writing articles about negative gearing. We should abolish negative gearing because it skewers the property market, and, you know, the greedy investors out there are, you know, claiming billions of dollars back. Well, if they did it tomorrow, guess what I would do with my properties? Cameron, increase all rentals by 30%. You know, it's just that simple. No one would sell anything. That's the reality. This is another one of those things where, you know, let's get rid of lines of credit because they're bad. So this is the main distinction between the redraw facility and line of credit, which they're trying to blur the lines between. And I'm going to show you the exact differences. Now, even bank managers don't know the difference, and I'll show you why. And I've had discussions with bank managers over the phone about this. So this is a redraw facility and a line of credit facility. Now, I want you to take this down. It's not part of the PowerPoint, and it is important. So you've got a property here for $500,000. And in both instances, you've got a line of credit or a facility for $100,000. In this instance, you've got a redraw facility, and this is a line of credit. Your interest is 7% per year. It's cheaper now, but let's just keep it consistent. You take out 10 grand. What's 7% of 10,000? $700? Divide by 12? 63 or something? Who's got a calculator? 700 divided by 12. Anyone? No one's, come on, guys. Come on, calculator, please. Can I get a calculator physically from somewhere? Not an iPhone. 700 divided by 12, 58.33. So per month, you've got to pay $58.33. Now, this is where the difference occurs between a redraw facility and a line of credit. With a redraw facility, you physically have to make that repayment every month. So at the end of the month, you physically have to transfer $58.33 to a BSB account number that has the redraw facility. With the line of credit, with an interest-only capitalising option, which is for all true lines of credit, it diminishes the $90,000 by the 58.33 every month until it reaches zero. Does everyone understand that? It doesn't need any additional repayments. At the end of the first month, with the redraw, you need to pay $58.33, which is 7% on 10,000. With this one here, you've got 90,000 left over because you've got a $100,000 facility. It just takes away the $58 from the 90,000, which means it's 89,900 and whatever. And what happens the second month? Takes away that other 50. So how much are you paying per year? $700, right? How many lots of 700 are there in 90,000? It's more than a lifetime. So you never have to make those repayments. Do you understand the issues the banks have with this product? You set it up, you've got equity, you're drawing against it, you never have to pay it back. With this one, you have to make repayments every single month. If you don't, you can default. Who understands that? Who doesn't understand that? No? So basically, with this one, you've got $90,000 left in your facility. Yeah? Because you got 100, you took out 10. The repayments from the $10,000 that you took out, you spent it. You went to the casino and you blew it. You put red, it came up black. Right? So you need to pay $700. With this one, you have to physically pay $700, which is $58.33 a month. Physically transfer from somewhere. With this one, you don't touch it. It automatically deducts the $700 out of the $90,000. And every year, the $90,000 diminishes by $700. That is a true line of credit with a self-capitalising interest-only component. Okay? They are the best products on the market. They're all equal, right? So it's not like that one is better than that one. W Financial Enterprise line of credit, Bank of Melbourne, St. George, portfolio loan, Macquarie Premium line of credit, Westpac Advantage Pro line of credit, Equity Manager by ANZ. Here I don't call them lines of credit. Why can't the world be simple? Line of credit. Is it a line of credit? Is it a duck? It's a chicken, Oh, it could be a duck. I can see it's a chicken, Why can't they just call it what it is? Is it too much to ask? Why do they have to call it ProLac, Pro Line of Credit, ProPac and Essential this and Equity Manager and, they're trying to make it exciting. It should be very clear. Is it a line of credit or isn't it a line of credit? If it's a redraw or anything else, you have to make mandatory repayments and doesn't capitalise the interest automatically. And what you want is something that capitalises the interest automatically. Otherwise, you can't do what I'm about to show you. You see, with this product here, when you have a redraw facility, you have to physically contribute new money to your account every month. Money coming from elsewhere. With a line of credit, you're not doing anything. You're drawing 10 grand out against equity, and what happens in real terms to money? There's no new money flowing to the bank. Do you guys understand? They're not actually making any more money. They're just reducing your facility, which is just on paper. So you physically took out 10 grand from the bank, and they are not getting any monthly new contributions of any new money from you. You're just, in some reality, you're reducing this $90,000 credit facility by $700 every year. And in 10 years' time, what do you do to the facility? You double or triple it. Do you guys understand? So it's actually a redraw from the bank without any contributions. It is the worst product that they could possibly offer you from their perspective, and it's the one that you want as an investor. The best product that they want you to have for them is a fixed or a variable P&I loan for 30 years, which they make virtually on the $500,000 loan, they make something like $900,000 in interest repayments over the life of the loan. That is the most profitable product for them to sell. The least profitable is a line of credit. Guess which products I have only? These products. So I'm teaching exactly the opposite of what they want you to do, basically. I remember when I was, it's funny when you try to refinance something. If you're ever bored, I do this in the winter time. If you want to save money on banks, ring up your bank and say, "Hi, this is Conrad Bob," and you can only do this with interest only or with variable loans, not fixed, because you have exit fees. Hi, this is Conrad. Can you fax a mortgage payout letter to my accountant? I'll give you the fax number. Just ring up your bank on the call centre. Right? Do not talk to the person that picks up the phone because they're probably not even in Australia and they have no ability to negotiate anything. So you say, can you just fax a mortgage payout letter to my accountant? This is my customer number. Hang up and wait for the phone call. Because guess who calls you back? Client retention manager. Their job is to save you. And then just say, look, you know, I want a 1% discount. You know, St. George or wherever, Liberty's offering me, you know, 6.25. You guys have me for 6.95. If you want me to stay, what can you do for me? So write this down as a key distinction. Threaten to leave every 6 months. Threaten to leave every 6 months. I've just made you so much money, seriously. Every 6 months, threaten to leave. Nicely. I'm going. Bye. So you're breaking up with the banks every 6 months. You know, when you have a certain level, when you reach about 2 million borrowings with the bank, you get flagged and you end up with the high net worth section of the bank, and they start ringing you and saying, hi Conrad, this is, I love this. So I left NAB by this stage, right? Hi, this is Jonathan for private banking, how are you? Good. Conrad, I've noticed that you're doing a lot of lending. I'd like to take you out for lunch and see how I can add value to you. Well, I love people adding value to me. How can I say no? What a great line, isn't it? Yeah. What are you going to say? No, stuff you, don't add value. I like the water grill in Toorak, Jonathan. So I can really think there, you know. So I know the budget they have about $2,000 a month because I used to have that budget for lunches. So I always go for Toorak, you know, water grill, nice $60 Merlot, you know. We really drain their budget that month. So I know what the pitch will be. The pitch will be to cross-securitize or cross-collateralize my properties at a cheaper rate and save on fees, right? And the first thing that I do, once we order obviously, is this is what I do. This is completely just stuffs up their psychology. Jonathan, I would like you to charge me a higher interest rate on my products, but increase my line of credit facilities to 97 with no LMI or thereabouts. But I'm happy to pay another 1% interest on that. No, I was going to offer you a cheaper rate, you know. So it's like the opposite of what they want to do, because what they want to do is cross-securitize and give you a cheaper rate. But I'm not interested in a cheaper rate. I want to pay you more money. I want to give me more money so I can pay you more. You know, it's like the opposite of what they do. So these lunches end up nothing at the end. You know, they just come really confused. They walk away. You know, when you talk... And I hardly ever get it. You know when you're talking and explaining your strategy and they look into space and you know that they're somewhere else? It's those looks that I get at these lunches. No, I want you to increase my interest rate by 1%, but give me more lines of credit, more cash out, because I can buy more property and capitalise the interest. But I was going to give you a discount on the rates. No, I understand that, but I don't want that. I want you to charge me more fees and more interest. They don't even understand how to come back with that because they've never had that before as a banker. A mortgage offset allows you to offset any... So what's an offset account? An offset account simply means that one amount is offsetting another amount every day. Now here's the principle of money. So in terms of structuring yourself, this is what I recommend you do. In terms of structuring yourself and this is one of the most important, we're going to run out of paper probably. So you've got your owner-occupied property, which is bad, meaning you've got to get rid of it as soon as possible because no one's contributing any money to it. Then you've got your good property. You've got your first investment property, which is good. Now, what you have here is you have a line of credit with a 100% offset set up, which is just anyone can do that for you on your owner-occupied property. If you would like, you can have your first investment property linked to your house, meaning it's the same bank. So you could say, go to NAB, for example, and set up the professional package because it's easy to set up that way. Now you're over here, you're working as a couple. You've got a job, and your job pays your income. Your income goes into a BSB account number over here, right? Let's say it's with ING. And then what happens at the end of each month is you pay your mortgage. With an offset, the way you should be structured is your job should put all your incomes straight into your 100% offset. Your rentals also should be going into your 100% offset. So when you got your second investment property, okay, which is good, your rentals should go straight into there as well. And I'll talk about buying this through trust as well, but I just want to Make sure you guys understand the money flow. Meanwhile, what you're doing is you're living off a credit card. You've got 2 credit cards, or 1, which is 45 or 55 days interest free. I usually use the Amex because I get 3 velocity points for every dollar spent. Visa's 1.5. And then you basically have this BSB account number has auto sweeping, which means that you program it to pay off your balance before the interest-free period expires. This is the best way of setting up your structure, full stop. Okay? And those 10 products will do this for you, and Michelle can set it up for you. You can do this, and this is how I'm set up with all the properties, except everything's in trusts. And I'll show you how it works with trusts. Okay? Now, what is the implications of setting this up versus a principal and interest home loan? How many people here have a P&I loan on a house? Yeah? Yeah. Few? Principal and interest home loan? You guys are smart. In Adelaide, it was everyone. So if you're a couple, let's say for example you're on $55,000 each with a $500,000 30-year P&I loan, this is the implications for you. Principal and interest 8%, 30-year loan, okay, you're basically paying per month $3,250 repayments per month. 9.5 interest only, line of credit with an offset. You're paying your mortgage off in 14 years. More importantly, look how much you're saving. With P&I, you're paying $837,000 in interest over 30 years. With interest only, line of credit, you're paying $429,000. You're saving yourself $407,000 in unnecessary interest repayments over 30 years. Now, is that after tax or before tax? That's after tax. This is why most Australians end up broke with one house paid off at 65. Because they take 30 years to pay off an asset and they pay double virtually in interest what the asset's worth. $407,000, how long would it take a couple on $55,000 to save $816,000 or $17,000 virtually? You know, depending on the marginal tax bracket. A lifetime. And it's 9.5, which doesn't even exist. Let me show you another example. 6.5 versus 11.5. 6.5 being P&I, principal and interest, and then interest only is 11.5, which I've never seen 11.5. I'm just making up numbers now. Let me show you the implications. 11.5, let me show you the difference. 141,000 savings. Can you imagine? So what the banks do not want you to do is this, and this is very important. The whole industry is based around marketing 5.99%, right? Interest rate versus, let's say, 7%. But what they don't want you to understand is this, that if this product is 30 years and this can be done in 14 years, the amount of interest that you pay over the life of the loan is $800,000 here on $500,000 and only $400,000 here. Does that make sense? Because you pay it off in half the time. Yes, the repayments per month are theoretically higher, $3,200 versus $4,000. But look how much money you save. And this is the key distinction. Please write this down. It's not the interest rate that is important on the loan. It's the amount of interest that you pay over the life of the loan. Yes, 5.99 is cheaper than 7%, but this is just a number. Money is what counts. How much is leaving your pocket? You're paying 800 grand here in interest, here you're paying 400. Because through structuring correctly, because you've got rentals coming into your owner-occupied bad debts, and your salary sacrificing all your money, you're paying this mortgage off in 14 versus 30. 16 years difference adds up to a lot of money. And that's what the banks do not want you to understand. And that's why the whole industry is based on this 5.99, 5.89. Well, what is it based on? It's based on nothing. It's just advertising, you know. What they should be doing is, I've got 2 options for you, sir. Option number 1, 30 years, 800,000 interest. Option number 2, 14 years, 400,000 interest. Which one would you like? Which one do you think people would choose? Why is it so? Now, imagine someone at a high level at a bank said, guys, I've got this really cool idea. Why don't we educate the Australian public about lines of credit interest-only loans? and show them how they can really save 16 years off their mortgages and save $400,000 on a typical home loan, thereby reducing our $2.4 billion profits next year down to 1.3. What do you reckon, huh? What do you think is going to happen to that person? The number one priority for NAB, for any bank, is what? Profits, dividends to shareholders. They will do everything possible to make this as attractive as possible to increase this. The least profitable product they have is an interest-only line of credit. The most profitable is a P&I loan with the lowest interest rate. First of all, let's talk about interest rates and how they work and what happens and how they operate. So we know that, for example, our consumer price index has a very close correlation with interest rates, and the Reserve Bank of Australia actually regulates the overnight money market bank swap rate, which in turn the banks need to pass on, or they should pass on, to their interest rates. But the reality is, see, what happens in Australia is each bank has to balance their books at the end of each day. So if they're lending out money or they're taking deposits, the books have to be balanced, and they never have enough cash to balance their books. There's a thing in the Australian banking system called capital adequacy ratios, and there's 8% of real money has to exist at the end of each day in the bank account. So for every $100 out there, they need to have $8 on deposit. They never have that money. Where do they buy that money? They buy that money on the overnight money markets. Who regulates the interest rates? The Reserve Bank of Australia. But banks are moving independently of the RBA rates. Why? Because they're becoming irrelevant in the equation. Banks do not need to, that part of their cash flow isn't significant anymore in terms of the overall picture. Banks can now source money from other markets, especially international markets where they offer much cheaper rates. There's no legislation that actually dictates to banks that they have to pass on the entire savings back to consumers. It's always just been an agreement that they do, but they don't need to. So if the RBA cuts rates by 25 basis points, NAB doesn't need to cut rates by 25 basis points. They can cut them by whatever they want. Now, people were screaming at our banks during the GFC, but we got through the GFC thanks to our banks mainly, because none of our banks, basically, they were so cashed up, they got through the period of time really well. You know, because our loans could have been bouncing like in the US, but we didn't have that. So it's a good thing the banks will, that greed actually worked in our favour to a large extent. And our banking, risk weighting did really well in terms of international markets. So we actually came through it quite well. If you want to know what's happening to fixed rates, you can actually go onto the futures exchange yield curve in Sydney, which is, we've got a futures market here in Sydney, and they actually trade the bank swap rate. They predict what's going to happen to the movement. And I'll show you how accurate they are. This slide here is from April 2009. And it showed that the cash rate would fall to approximately 2.4% during September and October this year, which was back then 2009. And it didn't fall to that rate. They got the month correct, but it actually fell just to 3.25% or 3%. They got the month correct, but not so much the rate. Now it's 3.25, likely to go down to 3 again. Went down to 3, likely to go even 2.75, so it's very cheap. That means that standard variable rates will be around 5%, 5.5. We already can get funding at 5.6 through wholesale funders, which is incredible. To me, it's really relevant because what I do as an investor, in order to become successful, this is what I don't listen to anyone to do with financial planners, all these mortgage experts, unless they're an investor. If you look at the property market, the market in Australia can move in different directions, and it's usually measured in terms of clearance rates, which is how they measure consumer sentiment, which I'll cover in the next section. So the market can have 100% clearance rates. The highest that I've seen is 97. Can you imagine how stupid that was in 2004? 97% of all properties listed that weekend sold, which means that the vendors' unrealistic price reserves were matched by the market. So people were just paying stupid money. Then you got 50%, and then you've got 0. Then you've got 75 and 25%. At the moment, we're around 67%, right? We're between 60 and 67. So what I do with my properties is when the market is here, I buy a lot of properties aggressively because that means half of the properties are getting passed in. So you can negotiate really well with real estate agents. When is the best time to make an offer on the property? after the auction. You know, I love going to auctions and just, especially if I really want the property, and I just come in, guys, we're going to do this the hard way or the easy way. The moment you say you're a real estate agent, they just go, because they go, hi sir, it's Jonathan from, Hocking Stewart, how are you? Good, yes. I'm an agent. Oh shit, good. Yeah, we can't, they're idiots, They want 600, it's that kind of, the moment you say, who finds that in the industry that they work in? The moment you identify yourself as one of the industries, it's like, oh yeah. What I do here, when the clearance rates are above 80%, which is just a silly market for me because people are always unrealistic, I spend all my time looking at comparable sales or properties that have sold at a higher price point than my property, and I increase my lines of credit and I lock them in at the highest possible point. Okay, so your activity as an investor should be counter-cyclical to the whole market. When people are buying properties, you should be evaluating your properties and locking in your lines of credit. When people are selling their properties and crying, the sky's falling, you should be buying properties, negotiating hard. The second best time to buy property is Monday morning. All the agents are depressed. They're in the office, they hate your house.
What about 10 to 5 on a Friday, end of month, end of quarter?
Yeah, but Monday morning is depression time. The house is past 10, their sales managers grill them. No one's in the office because everyone's at work, bless you. Everyone's at work, right? And you're there with a checkbook. Can you imagine the desperation? And it's just quiet because no one goes into agents on Monday mornings. And then it's when you can make ridiculous offers and they can start calling people in front of you trying to get these properties sold because they've got no commissions. Their Audi A4 payments are due in. They're $875 and they hate your house. That's what happens. So if you look at I've got my car payments. If you look at the property market, we'll go through property cycles, you should be locking in your lines of credit here and you should be buying properties here at the bottom. Counter-cyclical investing to the majority of the market. So why would I ever fix my rates if the moment I get a higher comparable sale using RP data of a property across the road that's sold for a higher amount than my property, I'm going to my bank, reevaluating, increasing my line of credit. Why would I fix any portion of my loan? It doesn't make sense to me. And this is the compelling statistic. 80% of people who fixed their rates historically were worse off had they left them variable over a 10-year period of time. So to me, fixing rates is just silly. I mean, unless you can't do anything over like 5 years, it's just not a good system to operate in. Especially now, we're at the lowest point possible in the market. We've seen interest rates literally around 17% in 1990, 91. Non-conforming loans go up to 21%. We're currently sitting at the bottom of the cycle. We've got interest rates, dirt cheap, virtually since I think 1960s level. So I would leave them variable, and then just the moment you get high comparable sales, revalue your property, lock in your line of credit at the peak of the market. Remember, the peak of the market in Melbourne was December 2010, $601,000. Currently, we're at $535,000. So there's some properties that have lost, in terms of valuation, $65,000 in line of credit. That's a brand new deposit for a property. Do you guys understand? And you can't get that money back. And once you lock your lines of credit at the peak, the banks never recall your lines of credit. They can, but they just don't do it because it's too much work. So you want to be locking your lines of credit at the peak of the property cycle. That's where your majority of your time is spent. At the bottom, you're basically buying up bargains, and that's what I recommend. That's the successful behavior. There's a massive difference in the psychology of a sophisticated investor and the average person. The average person always focuses on cash flow. The sophisticated investor always focuses on making money through capital growth. So the true aim is really to control assets, to get lines of credit out, to live off your lines of credit. So what's the ultimate objective? The ultimate objective is to control everything, own nothing outright. Now, I'm going to show you basically, this is how I'm structured. I don't actually own any assets in my name. I don't have any assets. And I'll show you exactly how I'm structured. I'm actually structured the same way for every property. Even our owner-occupied property is in a trust with a corporate trustee, and we lease it back from ourselves. Okay, now I'm going to show you how we work negative gearing and everything. The most important thing is when you're doing this, even for your owner-occupied property, we've got a corporate trustee where I'm the director, my wife is the director, I'm the secretary as well, but she's the appointer of the trust. And then we've got a trust set up, which is never ever set up a family trust to do anything with properties. It's the dumbest structure you can ever set up. There's dozens of different types of trusts. Only use a fixed unit trust or a hybrid trust, but never ever use a family discretionary trust, which is for some reason all the accountants set up family trusts, which is a silly thing to do because you can't do anything with them. Basically, all your losses are trapped within the structure and you can't take out any negative gearing out of it. It's the dumbest thing to do. But when you set up a fixed unit trust or a hybrid trust to buy owner-occupied property, and it's in a corporate trustee, you literally have to go to an agent, and this is what we've done. It's literally arm's length transaction. And you say, hi, I'm the director of, let's say, ABC Proprietary Limited. We like to put our house on the market to lease, and here's our rental appraisal. Okay? It's $700 a week. You leave the real estate agency, you come back and say, hi, it's Conrad and Mara. We're looking for a property to lease. Hey, that's a good property. Can we look at can we do an inspection of that one? And can we sign a lease agreement? If you get audited, guys, right, it has to be all paper trail. We sign the lease agreement. They do a tenancy tribunal check. Gee, you guys been good? Yeah. We pay a deposit. And then we move into our own property and we literally pay our rental every month to the agent who pays it back to the business account, and then it goes to the bank in interest repayments. You guys understand? If you do it any other way and you get audited, you are gone. And I've been audited many times and I've always won. You know?
You can only do it for one property, can't you?
Yes, absolutely. So this is how how do you structure. I can only explain to you this from a mortgage broking perspective. I can't actually recommend this structure to you because technically this is something a financial planner should be explaining to you. So I'm only explaining this from a purely lending perspective of how do you get negative gearing out of trusts, how do you set up everything. So the first thing you have is you've got a proprietary limited company, and I like to have, the director is myself and my wife. I like to have 120 shares because 120 is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So it's easy to split later on if you need to. And then I've got a fixed unit trust. And let's say, for example, I'm buying a property which is $500,000. So how do I set up the loan and get negative gearing out of a trust? The first thing is the appointer, which is my wife, is the most powerful person in the equation because the appointer has the ability to sack the trustee at any point in time. So I'm a director here of this $120 shelf company. Okay, and she can sack me as the trustee at any time and replace the trustee with my mum, for example. So if I get sued personally, I don't have any assets. I'm just a director of all the bunch of companies that are worth nothing. Okay, and then my wife would sack me immediately as a trustee and replace myself with my mum, for example, or any other family members or any other corporate trustee. By the way, whatever you set up, as long as you've accumulated stuff together, and we've been together since I was 17, the family courts will get through all structures in Australia. You guys know that, yeah? So when you go to court, if you get a divorce, it's 50-50. Doesn't matter what structure you have set up, unless it's like in Switzerland somewhere, Isle of Man, beyond the the government's ability to claw it back. It does not make a difference what kind of trust you have set up, a corporate trustee on asset protection. Your wife gets half. Super, half of everything. Family courts get through all structures in Australia. So let's say you're buying a $500,000 property. Okay, so you've got 500 units in your trust worth $1,000 each. I'm over here, I'm Conrad, and I go to NAB. And I borrow $500,000. I go to NAB. The loan is in my name. Okay, I'm the borrower of the money, Conrad Bobilac. but the purchasing entity is not me. It's ABC, I'm just making up the name, Proprietary Limited, as the trustee for ABC Family Trust, Family Fixed Unit Trust. Do you guys know on the mortgage document there's different types of places, fields you fill up? There's guarantors, there's the purchasing entity, which could be anything, and there's the borrowers. So I'm borrowing $500,000 from NAB, but I'm not actually buying the property. I'm buying units in a fixed unit trust. And the property settles where on the title, it's actually ABC Proprietary Limited as a trustee for ABC Family Fixed Unit Trust. In Victoria, State Revenue Office doesn't recognise trust on property title, so just a corporate trustee ends up being on the property title. Okay? So the property actually settles inside the trust. I'm the director and the guarantor on the loan, and the loan is in my name. And I pay on $500,000, let's say it's 7% per annum, I'm paying $35,000 interest only. The property losses are trapped within the trust. So on the property, you get to depreciate the building over 40 years at 2.5% per year. So let's say it's 200 for the build, 300 for the land. So what's 2.5% per year on 200,000? 5K. Okay, and then the land goes up basically in value, and the fixtures and fittings you can depreciate over between 1 and 12 years, depending on what it is. You know, like kitchens and tiles. You know, some things have a lifespan of 5 years, some things have 10 years. So what happens is this particular property gets rental income from the tenant, and let's say the tenant's paying you 4% per annum, which is $20,000. But before the trust distributes the proceeds against that rental, you get to claim what? Depreciation on the building, which is $5,000, plus all your associated expenses, property management, 7% plus GST, depreciation on the fixtures and fittings, insurances, landlord's insurance, council rates, and what I do is the money actually goes into my real estate's account, and he pays all the bills before the proceeds are distributed back to the beneficiaries. So against the $20,000, I literally have about 12.5 to 15 grand worth of deductions. And because I've purchased units in a trust, there's a nexus or a link between the expense and the income generating asset. Therefore, the $35,000 interest only per year is tax deductible against my personal income. Who understands that? I get to claim this and that, but not own it. I get all the debts, none of the ownership of the assets. The coolest thing that I've done is I've actually altered my fixed unit trusts through my solicitor to turn them into infinity trusts, which means a normal trust, by the way, have a vesting date of 80 years. So every 80 years, all the assets are distributed to beneficiaries, and there could potentially be tax implications, and the trust gets dissolved. But I've altered my trust deed that my trusts run indefinitely, and I've altered them, only solicitors can do this for you, and they're called bloodline trust. Which means that basically they follow my bloodline. So when my daughter, for example, Tiliana gets married, if she were to get divorced, he can't get any of the assets. It bypasses him, goes straight to her children. Isn't that cool? Controlling assets beyond the grave. I love it. Like, it's the coolest thing. It just bypasses all the relationship. If they're not blood, they get nothing. And it runs indefinitely. It's sick. I love it.
That's to do with bloodline will, or is it?
It's a bloodline will with a bloodline trust. The trust is altered as well. You can only do it through the South Australian courts, by the way, because... Yeah. Who likes that? Pretty cool? So that's how rich people structure themselves. And what they do is they end up with all these different... The end result's the same as before, but you end up with this corporate trustee with a property, another corporate trustee with a property, another one over here. This is NAB, this is St. George, this is ANZ, all standalone, all separate entities. No one knows what you have. No one can control how much money you borrow. You have debts, then you can do things like lending money back to your trusts. So even though your trust and your incorporation of your corporate trustee in the trust is a one-off expense of $3,000, $2.5 to $3,000, your land tax is calculated in thresholds per entity. It doesn't combine the land tax threshold between the entities. Who understands that? What just happened with $3 million in land tax per year, every year? So what's better to do? Pay $3,000 once off and then not worry about it for the rest of your life, or pay $24,000 every year on a compounding basis as your land tax component appreciates in your property portfolio? Do you see why the rich set this up this way? Why they don't own any assets in their own names? Why they keep borrowing money? The question always arises, Conor, what if they change this? What if the legislation changes? I had this question. Well, let's think about who has trust in Australia. Politicians, doctors, lawyers, judges, massive amounts of trust. You reckon they'll get together? What do you reckon, guys? Let's get rid of all this trust. Let's become, open to litigation. Like that's ever going to happen. And this is the way they structure themselves. They maximise tax deductions. They minimise the amount of tax that's outgoing. They control assets without direct ownership. Now, the final thing that I want to leave you with finance is this. Should I buy my first property in a trust or should I buy it in my own name? Sometimes the cheapest way of asset protection is basically debt. So if you're borrowing 97%, your first secured creditor is basically who? It's the bank. So you've virtually got no assets anyway. I would say for most people, your first property and second property, it's okay to do in your own name. Okay, I'm not giving advice here. I'm just giving you just experience. But then afterwards, if you want to aggressively grow your property portfolio, you'll be completely insane to keep buying properties in your own name, because eventually you won't even be able to handle the amount of land tax that you're paying. So even though your rentals are going up, your land tax is going to kill you. And then you're always open for litigation as well. Like, why would you do it? It doesn't make any sense at all.
You're saying buy each property you buy with a new trust.
Yes.
Do you use the same company?
Never. And plus, if the company has traded even once, they can actually get through the corporate veil and take your assets. It has to be a non-trading company solely for the purpose of owning your assets. Make sure your companies are never trading, guys. The non-trading companies. So it's reflected in the minutes, and you get a letter from your accountant saying it's a non-trading company purely used for asset protection, not to trade. If you trade, they can argue that the directors were negligent, and then bang, you can just get through the trust. I won't spend too much time on trust because really I'm not a solicitor or an accountant. I'm just showing you from a lending perspective how to set. This is how the rich set themselves up, and I've shown you that exactly how they do it. And then if you want to sell this one, renovate this one, do whatever you want, you're in control, and they don't know what you're doing, and you're in control of everything. This is the best way to do it, guys, and we can do it for you. Questions? Yeah. Let's get a microphone. So what we'll do is we'll get a mic runner. We'll start off from this side. And just say your first names, and then if you ask the question, so everyone can benefit from the question. What do you do for a hobby?
Conor and Stuart. Can you touch on the trust scenario again with regards to the family trust and why that's not the perfect vehicle?
Yes. Good question. Why is a family trust not a good vehicle to invest in property? Mainly because because a family trust doesn't have units in it, it's not a hybrid trust or a fixed unit trust, you can't buy units in it in order to control the property. So the family trust usually gets the loan, so it's a business loan to the family trust, and you're the guarantors as the director. So the loan actually that gets done through a family trust, usually it goes through the business banking sector, and the extra application is in the corporate trustee and the trust itself. And because it is such, you yourself have no expense as an individual that you can claim back against your PYG income. So you see in this particular example here that I showed you before, the loan is actually in my name. I'm borrowing $500,000. And then I'm buying units in a trust. It's like buying Telstra shares. And Telstra happens to buy property. So there's an expense to me of holding these units, which is $35,000 interest only on that $500,000 loan. So there's a nexus between the expense and the income generating asset. Because remember, the beneficiaries could whatever, but you're the director of the corporate trustee. If this was a family trust, all the losses will be contained within the trust and they cannot be taken outside of this structure. If you've got that, you've just given bad advice.
Excellent. Complexity on changing it to a unit trust now,
Stamp duty.
even if you're...
Yep. There's no way around it.
Because we had to change it once because we had been given more bad advice, and we had a trading company as trustee for the family trust.
Oh, that's really bad.
But that we got around, created a new company. But
Yeah, you
didn't
just
have
change
to
the
pay
trustee.
stamp duty.
No, you can chop the head off at any time and nominate any trustee you like.
Yeah.
But the moment you change ownership of this, you pay stamp duty. So you got to take it out of one structure, put it into another structure. So not a good thing.
Okay.
Questions through here? These are good questions, by the way, but that's why you need to have, and that's why, you know, technically you were given correct advice, but it wasn't maximized, you didn't maximize your situation.
Hi, I'm Mark. I just wanted to know, what's the annual costs for running the company and the trust per annum?
Probably about $2,500. $2,000 to $2,500.
Okay. So in the scenario that you've got, say, $3 million worth of land and maybe $5 million worth of property, and you're paying, what was it, $24,000, $25,000?
Still cheaper.
It still works out cheaper?
Oh, massively, yeah. And I'll do that later on. I'll show you.
All right, yeah,
I'll show
'cause
you
I'm
property over 50 years. Like you could end up with $10 million in land tax. Sorry, in land value.
Yep.
I mean, there could be extraordinary amounts of land tax that you'd be paying. You
Yep.
know. So the thing is, it's better to set it up at the beginning, and obviously, with your auditing fees and your tax returns, you can get a package done by an accounting firm. You
Yeah, I was
don't need
gonna
to
say-
pay individually.
Yeah, once you've got more than
Yeah,
a few.
once you've got them a few, they'll bundle them together and they'll charge you an hourly rate. So it works out much more cost effective.
Okay. And secondly is on the borrowings. So do I, as a director, borrow the funds?
Yes, the borrower is actually you as an individual,
Yep.
based on the strength of your
And I lend
financial
back to the
situation.
trust.
No, and then you buy units in the trust,
Yep.
and the trust settles the property. You can also do a scenario where you're actually lending the money back to the trust, okay, at a high interest rate, but that's getting more complex, and you'll need to get independent advice about that. The ATO doesn't like that anymore, so the safest way to do it is to actually buy units in a trust. So it's 100% no problems there. Yeah, so the loan is in your name, and you're buying units in the trust settles the property in the trust and the corporate trustee. Your solicitor does a trust deed loan. It's all structured through someone that knows what they're doing. That's the most important thing. The most important thing to understand is that, because I get this asked all, just at a break, I got asked this question about what should I buy first and how should I buy it. As an individual, you can borrow 97% LVR, okay, which is really cool. So you want to max out a few properties in your own name. The moment you go down to 80% LVR, you might as well just use trusts. So whether it's for your second, third or fourth property, I don't know your situation, and everyone's different in this room, but eventually I would recommend definitely looking at asset protection. You'll be absolutely insane if you keep accumulating properties in your own name. Remember, if you lose one, it's a domino effect. You'll lose everything. Imagine someone trips. It doesn't need to be your fault, guys. It can be a tenant can fall over and impale themselves on a fence line and sue you for $10 million, and I'll guarantee you're going to lose everything. You know, like these cases are well documented of people losing everything, getting sued, not even their fault, just because the property was, something happened on site on the property, you know. So if you have separate entities, each asset is standalone. There's no spillover of assets. They can't seize your assets. Okay, so if you're building long-term wealth, definitely do it. But eventually, you got to understand with trusts, normally it's 80% LVR. It's very difficult to get cash out as well. Like for example, I'm doing a renovation now on one of my properties, which is in a trust, and I couldn't even get a line of credit set up against this particular property through this lender, and it was too difficult for me to refinance. I just couldn't be bothered. So I had to do a fixed building contract with the actual building company, and then they would do progressive drawdowns. They just didn't want to give me cash. So it's more paperwork, same result, because it's a fixed building contract. They do progressive payments, so 11,000, 22, 22, 22, 11,000, but they don't control the money. I just authorize the invoices, the bank's settlements team. They value the property at intervals, make sure the work's getting done, and they pay out the money. So it is becoming stricter, but to me, it's always a long-term thing. because I'm a buy and hold, never sell investor. I'm never selling any of my properties, ever. You know, they'll be passed down to generations from now. If you want to buy and sell properties, this is not the way to do it. There are other options for you, but you've got to get independent advice. Like my advice is, don't take everything that I teach you here, you know, verbatim and go and set this up. Go to Michelle, go to our legal team, go to accounting, get independent advice, see what is the best for your situation, because everyone's different. You know, I'm just giving you examples of how it's done at a high level, you know. But it should look something like that eventually, you know, depending on whether your strategy is accumulate, buy and hold, or trade property.
I do have one more question.
You're greedy.
I've got a couple of properties. Sorry.
Nice.
Somebody else
These are
wants
good
to-
questions. These
Yeah,
are good questions.
If I've got a couple of properties at the moment that I don't have set up in trust. Now, I'm obviously worried about asset protection. Can you set
No
up?
one ever is until they get sued.
Well, I'm worried about it because you just hear a lot of stories. And
Oh, you mean you are worried?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I thought you
know
said
that
you're not
we,
worried.
New South Wales and Victoria are like the second or third.
Yeah, it's
fourth,
incredible.
litigious states in the world. Is there any way of setting up a shelf company that's responsible for the day-to-day running and maintenance of the place, so that if you do get sued, it's the shelf company that's responsible for their lack of, not, putting.
Oh,
putting
yeah,
it all
I
back
don't know.
in.
That's a legal question. It's beyond my expertise. I don't know the answer
Yeah.
to that. That's a little bit beyond what I do.
All right. No worries.
Sorry.
Cool.
Speak to a solicitor.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. Any other questions here? So initially, buy a few in your name, and eventually when you got a lot of lines of credit, we got cash in there, start setting up your structures. The worst thing is to overstructure yourself. That's also bad. Spend 10 grand on overstructuring and finding out you can't even borrow money because you've got to go 80% and you haven't got a 20% deposit. You want to get into the market as aggressively as you can, but as a long-term strategy, I just want to impress upon you that this is the way you should look like later on eventually. Otherwise, you're going to have 10 properties in your own name, you're going to get sued, you can lose everything. Question at the back?
Sorry. My question is, at any possible point in time, you know how sometimes you can say, with my partner and I could have my name added to the house, to the title.
Yes.
Is there any way that you can add the trust to the title and then eventually have your name taken off, or do you actually physically have to do it like a sale?
There's stamp duty implications, always.
Okay.
Yes, you can do a percentage nomination on a title.
Yep.
You can have different ownerships of percentages and you pay stamp duty accordingly.
Okay.
But no, the answer is putting names on title means selling and buying.
Okay.
So it means stamp duty. So the State Revenue Office always wants to get a bit of money for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Great. Okay, so these are really good questions, by the way, and I'll do a Q&A at the end of this as well to make sure that you have all your questions answered. And obviously, we're always here, so if you need to see us during breaks and stuff. What is the main objective? How can you retire on $135,000 passive income per year? That's what I'm going to show you how you can do that with properties. Now, you can even do this with house and land. Okay, let's say, for example, and we know that, or any property really, even if properties are growing at 8% per year, and how do you know something is growing at 8%? You just go to RP Data and you get a suburb history report, which you can buy, and I'll show you where to buy that. So if you buy a property in year one for $450,000, the same property at 8% capital growth in year two will be worth $486. So I'm assuming you're buying the same properties every year, but obviously they're exponentially increasing in value. And look at what just happens with 4 properties. So in year 7, this property is the same as that property, but it's just 7 years later, they've just appreciated by 8% compounded. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to work with real figures. There's 3 phases of the retirement system. There's a building stage, a consolidation stage, and a harvesting stage. Now, building is where majority of your learning occurs, where you're getting a lot of information, education, and then eventually you're just building, putting those structures in place. Once you set up your first structure correctly, guys, and you get the right team, the second and third are just easy. It's all over the phone, it's just simple. It's the first one that's the hardest always, to get that one right. And really for your first property, it might not even be an option. You might have to go 97, 95% LVR for your purchase. Whatever you can get, I'll take in this market. Your plan will vary depending on your risk profile. What's your risk profile? Your risk profile is how much debt you can handle comfortably and how well you can sleep at night. How do you know? Well, when you have $2 million in debt, you'll know whether you can sleep at night or not. So let's say, for example, you're buying properties here for 500,000, and I've taken the compounding out of this equation. So I just want to focus on the 500. I want to show you the mechanics of where the money comes out of. How do I get the money out of these things? Year 1 and 2, you buy 2 properties for 500,000, then you have no purchase for the next 4 years. Okay. In year 6, you buy another property for 500, and year 7 another property for 500. So you're buying basically over 10 years, you're buying 4 properties, which, I mean, Justin did it in 12 months. You know, we've got clients already doing that. That's very, very achievable. In year 11, the same property for 500 is worth 1 million, and then in year 21, it's worth 2 million. And I'm going to go through the history of the whole property market to prove that to you. Since 1901, that's been happening. In year 12, the second property does the same thing. You know, so what you do is you refinance the property in year 11 at 1,080,000, which is $800,000. Which means that you've got an existing loan for 500, which means you've got equity of 300,000. Now, 300,000 over 7 years is 1.2 million because you've purchased 4 properties over 7 years. So you've got 300,000 times 4. Which means, and it's tax-free because it's a line of credit. You don't pay tax on lines of credit. Can you spend a line of credit on anything you like? Absolutely, because I use it to buy holidays, I use it to buy cars, clothes, furniture, everything.
Can you do that out of your trust?
Yes, you can. You can distribute money anywhere you like. I used to think for some reason before I set up my first trust, it was somehow like you can't take the money, there's only like one day a year we can go in somewhere. But you can just transfer money online. Like it's just like the same as personal banking. So what happens is you've got this line of credit there and you're drawing down the equity from these properties. Now that property goes from 1 million to 2 million, so you've got a line of credit here for 800,000, okay, based on the previous amount. So basically what happens is you've got 300,000 over 4 property purchase over 10 years, even though you're buying them in 7 years, is 1.2 million over 10 years, which is $120,000 per year. You spend 60,000 per year tax-free, and you use the remaining 60,000 to capitalize the interest for the next 10 years. So let me show you what that means. So you've got basically $120,000, and you split it up into 2 lots of 60,000. Now, if you're paying 8% on $60,000 interest only per year, what's 8% on 60,000? 8 times 6? What is it? 4,000 times 10 equals?
48,000.
Plus, you've got the other 12,000 for compounding interest on interest. Does everyone understand that? So you're basically using this whole amount up. You spend this money in 2000, let's say it's 2022, you just spend the 60 grand tax free. By the way, 60 grand tax free is the equivalent of about 100,000 pre-tax, would you agree? Because 100 grand you pay tax on. That's tax-free money. And then you use this amount to pay the interest. Okay, so it's the equivalent of every year you've got 120,000 or 1.2 million over 10 years. You're drawing down $60,000 physically every year, and you're allowing the rest to pay the interest on the interest. And then in year 10, what happens? Your first property doubles again to 2 million. So you only hit one property every few years. Does everyone understand? So basically, tax-free every year, structured by lines of credit. So what happens is, when you're actually living off your property portfolio, this amount of equity that you have here is 1.2 million, which is basically $60,000 that you're drawing down. And then you get to $2 million because it goes from 500 to a million to 2 million. Then you've got 800,000, which can capitalize the interest on the previous amount you took out, plus a new 60,000 index, which could be $80,000 or $90,000 by that stage. You keep drawing down the income, capitalize interest, refinance all your properties, set up your lines of credit. You can only draw enough that your rental income allows you to draw down. And usually you'll find long-term, it'll be an LVR around 60, 70%. And then what do? You keep drawing down the income and then you die. Who here agrees that one day they're going to die? Yeah? So your death cover always has to match your level of debts. And eventually, because your beneficiaries are your kids or charity or whoever, all your properties become unencumbered. You've lived a wonderful life of spending money, and your kids get everything paid off. The worst thing you can do in your life is to spend your time paying off the principal of something. Why wouldn't you get insurance companies to do it for you? Death cover's there for that reason. You die, you're definitely going to die, and your death cover pays off everything. Who likes that strategy? That's my strategy. Spend, 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 die. Right? Big check from the insurance company comes in. Kids, here's your properties unencumbered. Thank you very much. That's it. Now your premiums will go up, obviously, and there'll be staggering amounts when I'm in my 90s and 80s. I've got to kick the bucket at 96. I won't make it to 96, I can tell you. And suicide is covered up to 13 months, by the way. So you can live off your line of credit, which is what I do, which is probably the most aggressive way of living. I mean, now that I work, I don't need to do it. But when I stopped working, I mean, I could have lived indefinitely just drawing down equity from my property portfolio. You can use your line of credit to trade shares. You can make, covered calls are returning 3 to 5% a month, whatever they're returning. So you could take out 100 grand, which is actually preserving your capital. And you've got 10 years to learn it. I'm sure if you've got Nick Halleck to teach over 10 years, you'll eventually learn how to do covered calls. So you've got 100,000, you're making 3% per month, which is 36% per year. You're making 36 grand for every 100K that you're drawing out. And 3%, I've got hundreds of clients literally that are doing covered calls. It's the most conservative strategy. What you can do is also, you can sell a portion of your property portfolio and pay off the others. So you might say, for example, I don't like all this debt, Conrad, I get it, but I want to have an income, a passive income, living off my property portfolio unencumbered. So you might say that I'm going to buy 10 properties at $500,000 each, and eventually I'm going to sell down 6 to pay off the other 4 completely, because you need to allow for capital gain tax as well. So imagine these properties in 10 years' time are worth 1 million, so you want to have 4 million unencumbered. So that could take you 12 years or 15 years. 4 million at 4% per year, rental equals how much? 160 grand passive income for life. It's taxable because it's rental income, and you've got no depreciation, so you're literally paying tax. But you've bought 10, you sold 6, pay off the other 4 completely. So basically you're selling half of your property portfolio to pay off the other half. And you've got unencumbered properties living off the rental income, which to me is not a good idea, but I mean, it's probably the most conservative way of doing it. You see, the thing with, if I ever get in trouble with I don't know what definition of in trouble is, because I can't get sued and the market's not going to crash. But if something were to happen, I could just sell down my properties. It's an easy thing to sell a property. It's not hard. You list it with an agent, it sells. It's like Melbourne's a very liquid market. There's not much risk. We're not in Bulgaria here. We're like townhouses in St Kilda will be snapped up overnight. There's always people. By the way, any Bulgarians listening to the home study, I apologise. I'm sure your market's very good. So there could be some people. I had a joke about Romanians and this guy, I'm a Romanian, and he watched my home study and it was really funny. Who the hell knew the Romanians would be listening to my home study? So sell 6, allow for capital gain tax, 4 million unencumbered, 160 grand that you're living off. The plan is about 10 years, so you can do any of these. I do the first one. I used to do a combination of, I used to trade credit put spreads, but I just lost passion for it and just took too much time. Now it's just passive, each one of those. With my lines of credit, I always set them up at the highest possible level with each lender, depending on the restriction, but I never draw it down. I always just have it there as a buffer. So I've got a lot of lines of credit, because remember, your line of credit is like a credit card. It's just your limit. Well, you only get charged for what you draw down. So I always try to set them at the highest possible level, just in case I ever need money.
Right, so if you had something at 97 today, then you went and refinanced it, you'd get it done up to 90%.
97% of the new value.
Yeah, I'll get it as a top up.
So
Yep.
it might only be, say, 90%, for example, now, but you've got that 7% buffer, and then you just keep adding.
Usually if it's 90%, it will be the maximum from day one, and I would just increase the value of the property. The LVR would stay the same, but the line of credit would go up.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go from 90 to 97. I'd probably go from whatever it was originally, it would just be on the high value of the property.
You know, so that's what I meant. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, you set that up, you put it in place. It's just there. If you ever need cash for renovations or buy property or whatever, it's always there. It never gets clawed back. So you just do. And you know, with the professional property packages, it's one valuation, $150, one signature, and it's done. It's a top up to your facility. So they're actually made to have multiple properties. The wealth package and the professional property package, you can have up to 15, 20 properties in those. You know, and they're made specifically for this reason, but very few people are using them. You know, I just think that banks don't educate clients well enough on the advantages of having these kind of packages. They've been around for forever, but very few people use them effectively.
Can you get it straight off the cuff, like 97% buying a brand new property
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do 97 all the time for our clients through Michelle.
and a line of credit?
Yeah, but it depends on what you qualify for. You've got to go through the whole motion of getting pre-approved.